Yes. And I don't mean no, I mean yes. We are here on the latest episode of Tent Talks Tunes, in which I, Malcolm Tent, the guy who unashamedly wears his own t-shirt, talks to you about really probably the only thing that matters, and that is music. And the stuff that goes with it, which includes the people who make the music. Ah, yes, it doesn't just spring out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of the ether. It's got to have a conduit. Somebody's got to channel all that stuff. And today, we've got somebody who has done plenty of channeling and still is doing plenty of channeling. Former Trash American Style employee, CEO of M.U.D. Industries, and now third-time guest on Tent Talks Tunes. Ladles and Germans, I give to you, Mr. Craig Colorusso. What's up, Craig?
Hi, Malcolm. Thanks for having me. 3 times now.
3 times. It's taken us this long to tell the story of M.U.D., man. And I am very happy to be here. If anybody has not seen the first 2 episodes, I hereby invite you to go to the Malcolm Tent YouTube channel and or my Facebook page, where I've got past episodes of Tent Talks Tunes archived for your viewing pleasure. And I always stress to mention that Tent Talks Tunes is commercial free. You're not going to see any pop-up ads for some idiotic bullshit you don't want to buy. You're simply going to get a plea from me, a sincere, heartfelt plea from yours truly to go to my Discogs store or my eBay store, or just send me money. You know, it all works. Patronize me, and you won't have to look at some stupid ad for some kind of like breathalyzer or can of slime or dog treats or a new car, stuff that doesn't interest you, man. My stuff interests you. Talking about music. So patronize me and keep my channel free. All right, there we go. That was the big pitch. Now let's get all wound up as we talk to Craig Colorusso. First 2 episodes we did, we traced the beginnings of M.U.D. Industries all the way up until your present activities with sunboxes and a host of other nature-based interactive art pieces. So we're current, but now what we're going to do is one of my favorite things that we do on Tent Talks Tunes, and that's what I call the auto discography, in which we sit down with the label guy and we talk about the stuff that came out on the label. Craig, do you think you're up to it?
I'm going to try, man. I'm going to give it my honest try.
All right, that's all we can ask. I was trawling through the vaults, and the first record on M.U.D. Industries I found, or at least I thought was on M.U.D. Industries. I wasn't really sure about this one. So this one, I think right off the bat, we're going to start with something kind of controversial. Love controversy. It's good for ratings. This one right here, that's what it looks like on the front. On the back, it says Onion. Now, I was initially flummoxed because, as you can see on the back, there's no label information. But then I was digging around and I found a second copy, which does indeed have a sticker that very clearly says Mondo Psychotic Records. So what's the story behind this here Onion record and the Mondo version and the non-Mondo version?
The versions are identical except for the sticker. It all started with Monsterland, actually, the record that you put out with Joe Snow. I was part of the Joe Snow section of that release, and Joe had signed Onion, and it just sort of fell apart with the 2 of us. The only thing I think we agreed on was that Onion was a good band. And so he kind of bowed out, and I just sort of took over. And I didn't have a name, so that's why it was never actually printed. The cover is a print or a woodcut print by Elisa Flynn. I've always loved this cover. And so yeah, the back, I was just like, yeah, I don't know, man. We'll come up with a name and we'll put stickers on. Let's just move forward. I always had this idea, like I didn't want to sit around and waste time. And so I had a partner named Mike Jalenfi. Everyone called him Galippy. And so we did the Onion record. I really liked Onion. And then we did the Head record.
Wait, let's not get ahead of the game here. Let's
Okay.
we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. So, just to keep the chronology straight, would this technically be the first Mud Industries related release?
Yeah, with all due respect, I would say that Joe signed them. I mean, I think that was Joe's project, and I didn't want it to fall apart. So
Yeah, because I did notice on the record itself, and this is what always kind of threw me a little bit. If anybody can see with my cheap ass camera, the record has a Threshold Records logo on it, and that was Joe Snow's label.
right.
So I was always trying to reconcile why Threshold labels with a Mondo Psychotic sticker on the cover, and you just explained it. So yeah, this was technically the first thing you ever did, yes?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I paid for it. I put all the records together. Yeah, that's fair.
Right on. A very auspicious debut too, because Onion they're a great band. I mean, real. I guess they're more of a Bridgeport band than a Danbury band. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fudd's the only one that lived in Danbury. Yeah, they were definitely they were a unique combination of several familiar things, and I thought in a very interesting way. Yeah, I really liked them. Like all these bands, I wish there were box sets of them, but
You know,
how it goes.
what's funny is that they're really in a lot of cases could be, because as we'll continue onward, we'll see that a lot of these bands have pretty deep catalogs, um, even if a lot of the stuff never made it out of the greater Connecticut area. They produced a lot of stuff. And of course, whenever you have a record, there's typically outtakes and demos and rough mixes, and of course the live shows. And Onion, man, they were a killer live band. That's what I remember most about them. Almost every member of this band had a lot of charisma and could really, really play. And we got the live shot on the back. We got Rich on vocals and Ed on guitar and the infamous Fudd on bass. Or no, Fudd was on second guitar, wasn't he?
Yes, he was second guitar.
Right. And Tall Jim on bass and Bill Knapp on drums. Kind of everybody in this band was involved in one way or another with a lot of other bands in Connecticut as well. So it's kind of like a superstar, like all-star lineup we got here.
Yeah, it's actually like a super group. I mean, everybody in that band was pretty prolific.
Yeah, and it's a darn good record. So that's a really good way to start the label. And also nice to see that you could bridge the gap between Danbury and Bridgeport. It's like the various towns in Connecticut for, I don't know, even to this day, always seem like they were kind of isolated from each other. And there was never much of a, I don't know, not like hostility, but just removal from each other. It's always struck me as being kind of weird that way. Let's continue onward with our journey. And these are just random records. I'm not going in any kind of order at all. I just reached into a box, plucked them out, and we're going to do the show and tell with it. Here's one. GNU Fuzz from Newtown, Connecticut. What can you tell us about this one, Craig?
I would say GNU Fuzz was the first. I saw GNU Fuzz play at Trash American Style, and I thought they were absolutely amazing. And I thought, what can I do to be part of this? Obviously, I can't add anything to them musically. They've got that covered. So I can talk a lot, and I have a lot of energy. So I should put out their record. And I talked to them about it, and they were up to it. And I feel like they gave me some really beautiful music. I remember once Greg Vegas was like, hey, man, there are people I don't even know that are calling XCI to request Sleepy Town. I think something cool is going on here. And I thought, yes, mission accomplished. I mean, I think that's part of the the reason why I wanted to do all this. I thought GNU Fuzz was so great that I felt obligated to share it with the world. And I did it the only way I knew how, was to basically put it on a record and sort of make it permanent. Maybe looking back now, it seems kind of outdated thought, but I don't know. I still have the records. I think they're awesome.
Yeah, I don't think that's outdated at all. I mean, if anything, time has vindicated that outlook. Even in the age now of Spotify and streaming and digital platforms, people are opening up pressing plants almost daily. Like my main pressing plant almost literally can't keep up with the demand for records, for vinyl. So yeah, the idea of making a tangible object and sending it out is still completely valid. And the reason for doing it, I mean, what's better than that? Finding something you love and wanting to share it with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, and GNU Fuzz was a great band too. I do remember there were some people that were like, hey, they're not very punk rock. It doesn't seem to fit like with everything else you're doing. And I said, that may or may not be true. It just seems like an invalid thought.
Yeah, I mean, which gets back to the question, what is punk? I thought seeing these guys, Joe Roberto had an ironing board with all of his special effects on it. That's punk rock. Their drummer had a bucket for a kick drum. You're going to get more punk rock than that? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I remember one time Jessup had like a coffee can that he was playing, like instead of the snare, at a chicken coop gig, and it had like, I don't know, screws and dirt and acorns in it, and it sounded awesome.
Yeah, I remember that bucket sounded great as a kick drum.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that was like the home run of it all. Like, seeing a band that I really liked, putting out their record and having people that I didn't know like them. I mean, I knew this was not going to be, I knew this was not going to be like a huge money-making scheme. So I was okay with that. I just wanted to put out good records.
Yeah. So here's a technical question. Do you remember typically how many you would press of a record like this?
I think there's 1,000 of those on the gold vinyl. And there was some problem. It was originally pressed at United, but they declined to press it because there was some kind of weird noise on there. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, there's some kind of noise that is affecting our system. I was like, what are you talking about? So the ghost of Newtown was like affecting United. So those were actually pressed at Rainbow. And I had to go to a special place to get them cut. And, the guy was like, yeah, I don't hear anything. Here's the bill. Like, all right, let's do it.
And another interesting anomaly, if you will, once again, the Mondo Psychotic sticker on the label. Did you just forget to put a logo on it?
I still didn't have a name.
Oh, okay.
Everyone's like, you need a name. That's the start of it all. And I was like, yeah, I do need a name, but I got to get this stuff done. The name will come.
Which it did. Okay. And this might be a good opportunity to ask, what's the difference between Mondo Psychotic and M.U.D.? What's the difference between those two?
Well, Galippi was my partner for Mondo Psychotic, and, he and I split ways. And so I just wanted to kind of go like with a new start. As you can tell by my track record, I guess I'm a very hard person to deal with. So, so be it. I just wanted to have a clean slate. I don't like lingering things. I like clean breaks. And it seems more respectful.
Fair enough. Clean breaks as opposed to compound fractures. I can dig it. I can totally dig it. So there you go. 1,000 GNU Fuzz records. And yes, all on lovely yellow transparent vinyl. It's a fine record. I'd really honestly forgotten how much I like these records. Some of these I just for one reason or another haven't played in a very long time, and I dug them out to talk about them. Like, yeah, this is good. This is real good. One band I for various reasons have never lost touch with in the intervening years, due to a number of factors, had a release. Oh, I see it's got that sticker on it again, so it's another early one. There they are. We've heard them talked about a lot, but now we're going to talk about them directly. The almighty Head. What on earth can you say about Head?
I think I saw Head like 50 times one summer. And there's just something about Jim Roberto's guitar. He used to be like, Jim, your guitar speaks to me, man. And he's like, well, what does it say? And I was like, I don't know. There's something, I don't know if it's exotic because those guys were really into to drugs and things and I wasn't. But there's just something magical about those shows. I just thought they were so great. And it just and a lot of times I felt out of place there, but at the same time it just felt so good. It felt so right. I thought that they were one of those bands that, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but they should have been kings of the world, but they weren't. Oh well.
Yeah, that's usually, oddly enough, the exact phrase I use when I talk about Head. They should have been kings of the world, you know. For anybody who never got to see Head, they were just like transcendent live. It was just like so raw and so gut level, honest, psychedelic rock and roll with blood and sweat and dirt under the nails and grit and feathers flying in the air and broken shards of bottles all over the place and, you know, convulsions. I mean, Head was just, and that's where we get into the timeless dichotomy, you know. It's always like in almost anything relating to human endeavor, anywhere, there's yin and there's yang. I would have said that, okay, yin being cool to cold and yang being warm to hot. Head was the yang, Monsterland was the yin. Discuss.
I hear you, man. There was something dangerous about Head without being violent. You know, there just seemed like they were always on the verge of exploding, but it was beautiful. I mean, there's just something beautiful about it. There was like a harsh noise element to it. There was like a very non-pretentious poetic element to it with Ray Hoffmiller's like ramblings. It was just awesome. I mean, and Jim Roberto, dude, his fucking guitar speaks to me. I could still hear it. It's awesome. It was just this wall of noise, and it was always on the verge of falling apart, but it always made it through. It was awesome.
Yeah, the whole band was always like that. It's like everything was just on the point of collapse, but it never ever degenerated, you know. And I might as well just mention I have no vested interest in this at all, but they're actually in the middle of remixing and or remastering pretty much the entire Head catalog right now. And I know that they've done a version of some of their records, I think including a couple of tracks off of this one called Her Fix Today. And man, it sounds fantastic. It sounds the way that they always should have sounded on vinyl. And so if y'all look up Her Fix Today, you can see what Craig and I are foaming at the mouth over. Yeah, and and since I've just kind of like broached the subject, I'm just going to say that I think one of the problems with Head specifically was that that live sound, for one reason or another, never really accurately got captured on vinyl. You know, like I love this record. This record kicks ass, but the difference between the sound of this on record and what they would unleash live, they're just two different animals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay. I guess I will, you know, absolutely state that I prefer the live stuff over the recordings. But yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe this is something more about, you know, philosophically, should some things not be documented? You know, I mean, in a Lamont Young kind of versus Tony Conrad way, right? Like, what if there were no Head records and there were people like you and I saying, "Oh my God, you should have seen them; they were amazing." I don't know. I like that idea, but I also love to kind of go back and listen to these records. So,
Anybody who knows me knows I'm all about the documentation. You know,
sure.
I'm like you, I probably saw Head 50 times and I recorded every single one of those shows. And every once in a great while, I'll dip into the vault and I'll fish out a couple of tapes and I'll digitize them. And it's just like, boom, I'm right back there. I remember it, I feel it, I hear it, I smell it. In fact, just recently I digitized a show from the Chicken Coop.
Oh.
Oh, and if people did not see the first two episodes of Tent Talks Twos with Craig Colorusso, the Chicken Coop was a venue that Craig ran on Main Street in Danbury. And the particular show I digitized featured GNU Fuzz and Monsterland. And it just rages. It's just this raging show. And personally, I hate the idea of music that good just evaporating into the ether and disappearing forever. It pains me. So I'm all about having the records and the tapes and the bootlegs and the videos and the YouTube and whatever, man. Let's have more, let's have more. And I guess we'll just mention too, as far as the pressing goes, we have the Head record on a luscious red vinyl. And once again, from the early days of the label, it still has a Mondo Psychotic sticker, because I'm going to guess you still didn't have a label name at this point.
Did not.
Whew. Well, don't let that stop you, kids. Let this be a good example to everybody who wants to forge on ahead. Names, they can come to you anytime. All right, now this
as far as numbers go, I think there's 1,000 of those records. 700 of them were on the red vinyl, and then there were 300 that was a mix of the red and black vinyl, and it's like this really cool maroon.
Oh, that's right. I do remember those, and it's opaque, isn't it?
It is.
Right. Oh gosh, I'd forgotten about that one. So yeah, you got the translucent red, which I don't know if the people can see. It's translucent, and the opaque maroon.
Yeah, I mean, pressing plants weren't as artsy as they are now. I feel like, I mean, the records I see online are just fantastic. I do remember calling them and saying, I want something kind of murky, to kind of match the music. And they're like, well, we could do red and then we could put black and see what happens. And I was like, that sounds awesome, but they weren't so into that. They're like, we don't guarantee what comes out. And I was like, I get it. That's fine.
Yeah. It's a whole different ball game now. My favorite method when I press a record is to do this thing that they've called the random mixed vinyl, in which they literally clean up all the scraps at the end of the day and throw them into a great big hopper and melt them down the next day and press records from that. So you never know what you're going to get. And they sound fine. They sound just as good as regular vinyl, but yeah, you'll get like 15 on bubblegum pink and 700 on neon red and like 65 of them on yellow. It's a lot of fun. It is an awful lot of fun. Have you pressed vinyl at all lately on anything?
It's been a while. I did a Sunbox at 7-inch a couple years ago.
Oh, we talked about that last time. One of your great regrets.
I got so many,
Well, I'm not trying to kill any sales of Sunbox records, kids. Just go out and buy it anyway. It's fine. It's great. Trust me. It's okay. Now here, okay, that actually segues beautifully in a couple of ways to the next release, talking about label names and artsy records. This one right here, and also your hardcore roots, Wide Awake.
Wide Awake. Yeah, I went to high school with those guys, and for years it was sort of troubling because I thought that they were really an amazing band, and then I started to think, do I only like these guys because they're my friends? And I sat with that for a few days, and I was like, that's silly. They're awesome. I mean, there's no way around it. And I ran into an old friend of mine from high school, like a couple years ago, and he said, hey, I have a friend who's into hardcore, and he told me that Wide Awake is really great. So awesome for you guys. I was like, hey man, I've been telling you all along.
Right. You see, you cast the bread upon the water and somebody will get it eventually. So tell us about this one, this specific document. It's called The End, but the recording on it is not actually the last ever Wide Awake recording.
It is not. It's I think, is that the Aaron Straw?
Yeah, from the Aaron Straw benefit.
Yeah, it was just a great show. It was the end because at the time, the dialogue with John was that this might be the last Wide Awake thing. He wasn't really sure what was happening. And then a few years later, they got back together with a different singer. So you never know. It's like a classic rock, our farewell tour. um, the record, that record's awesome because it had a few songs that I really liked that never got recorded, and it's live and it just sounds awesome. And once again, I too am interested in the documentation of all this, and I think that to me that sounds like a Wide Awake show. When I hear that, I feel like, yeah, I was there. I was at that show. I was at the Anthrax. I saw all that happen. It was great. And so I thought that was a great way to kind of potentially end Wide Awake, even though they, thankfully they went on and did more stuff. I guess it's sort of weird to say the end in anything. I mean,
well, it's like one of my favorite sayings was by Gracie Allen, actually, from the Burns and Allen comedy team. She said, "Never place a period where God has placed a comma."
That's great.
Beautiful. But it's interesting that, when you say all this, I look at the copyright date on here, which is 1991. And 1991 was definitely kind of like a turning point year for this thing that we know as hardcore. Like a lot of the original bands, from the class of '88, like Wide Awake and all the Revelation bands, either for whatever reason, like right around then, were either breaking up or changing direction radically, or something was happening. Like the old hardcore scene as we knew it was almost completely turned around into all these different directions. And this is just like emblematic of that whole thing, I think.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I do feel like right around 91, I mean, the year punk broke is the phrase I hear all the time. I think part of it for me too is that I didn't want to forget stuff like Wide Awake. I didn't want to forget the Anthrax, even though for me at that point, all that stuff had sort of finished. But I always wanted to remember. And I think that's what's great about records. I think that's what's great about all this stuff is that, it's sort of like, it's a document to remember great times. I feel like sometimes maybe I think about music in terms of like the medium being time, in the sense that like when I hear something, I can immediately go back to the time that I heard it first or the time that it meant the most in my life, and for me, I graduated high school in 1988. Wide Awake was like roaring, and they were awesome. And like when I listen to those songs, it makes me feel young and beautiful again.
Right on.
And it's just great music. I mean, once again, I'm probably going to say this over and over again. This stuff is so good. I felt like I didn't want it to slip through the cracks for myself and for the world. And that's the honest truth, man. This music is so awesome. I felt like, I can't just sit here and absorb it. I have to do something to kind of push it all forward, and like I said, back then I had a lot of energy, man. I didn't sleep in my 20s. So I hope I put some of that to good use.
I would say so. It is a shame to think of the energy level that you once had as opposed to now. You're kind of, I can see you're moving slow and you're kind of run down and kind of sluggish. I'm sorry, Craig. My condolences.
Dude, when I first started booking tours, I didn't factor in sleep. I just did it. Now I'm like an old man. I have to be like, yeah, we got to bump that gig because I'm going to need to sleep somewhere in that time. I just feel like I might as well roll around in a wheelchair with my amp. But anyway, yes, I still love Wide Awake. I'm super excited that I got to do that. On top of the fact that they're a great band, they're my friends, Yeah,
and it's cool because it just shows that good music transcends genre. I honestly, to each their own, and everybody's got their own way of doing things and think of it. I've never understood the folks who outgrow certain things. Like I can see you doing that for a while. Like there was a time when I didn't listen to the Osmonds anymore. And of course there was a time when I didn't watch Saturday morning cartoons anymore. But you know, if it's good, it's going to stick with you forever, I think. And it just basically underlines what you're saying. I've never outgrown punk rock or hardcore ever, you know, to this day. And yeah, I mean, Wide Awake, they didn't, you know, get me the same way that they might have gotten you, but dude, at the time, they really were something. You know, they were a whole part of a whole thing. And I'm, you know, proud and happy to have been a part of that thing. And having seen them live, it was great. It was always great. Loved it. And we're going to talk about the artistic side of pressings and records, and also get a little bit of a commercial for yours truly in here. In my travels as an itinerant record peddler, you know, I buy record collections all the time. That's a hint, people. I buy record collections. Our good friend Jeff Terranova was selling a bunch of stuff, and for whatever reason, he had 30 empty sleeves for the Wide Awake, the end 7-inch. And of course, being the total weirdo that I am, I picked them up because, well, you figure I'll be able to do something with these. If they got value, I can't just see them ending up in a recycle bin somewhere. So I had these sleeves. I didn't know what to do with them. And then I remembered you can make records to fit a sleeve, because there is such a thing as the hand-lathed lo-fi 7-inch single. And these things are cut individually in real time by hand with a dude or dudette who have an old record cutting lathe. So they drill the hole in the plastic, they cut the plastic into a circle, they put it on the lathe, they manually put the cutting needle on the record, and it spins and the music plays, and it is engraved into the record in real time. They make them one at a time in real time. And when it's done, they put it in a sleeve and start the next one. So it's a
Did you get to watch?
Excuse me?
Did you get to watch?
We had a guy, because I'm in Danbury, next town over in Bethel, there was a guy who was doing this. And yeah, I'd go there and watch him do it. It was awesome. It was so cool. You know, he just play the same song or whatever over and over and over again and cut every single one. And at the end of 10 minutes or whatever, he'd have a record.
Awesome.
God damn, yeah, it was great. It was great. So just by the very nature of these things, they're made in very small quantities. So if you got 30 Wide Awake sleeves, you can get 30 hand-lathed records and stick them in the sleeves and come up with this, an actual release on my label, TPOS, which is the special hand-lathed edition of the Wide Awake, The End. 30 made, only 30, and that's, I think it's safe to say that's all there's ever going to be, because there ain't no more sleeves unless you, Craig, have got some somewhere.
I have sleeves, but they have records in them.
Oh, big problem, right? So you can't do this. So, yeah. Hand-lathed edition, 30, each one numbered and stickered to reflect its current status as a TPOS release. They're available from me. These things are expensive to make, so they're a little bit pricey, but of course, in these days of record store day, gouging on the prices by the major labels and disgusting rip-off prices, to get one of these babies for 20 bucks post-paid, I don't think is asking too much. In fact, I know it's not, because I've already sold one without even trying. So if you want one, here's my PayPal address, m.t@malcolmtent.net, where you can take 2 rolls of quarters, wrap them up safely, and send them to P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470, or go to Discogs and eBay. Just look me up, baby. TPOS. And you can own 1 or 29, I don't care, of 30. Don't laugh, Craig. This is capitalism. This is very important. 30 copies of Wide Awake, The End. And that, as far as the spiel goes, is the end. promise I'll let it be unless I decide to talk about it again before we sign off. I like them apples, Craig.
I think that's awesome. I always wondered why you did 30. Now I know.
Now you know. That's all there was. Oh, man. Okay. Well, speaking of hype and self-glory and self-promotion, you might as well come on to the next random M.U.D. Industries record on the pile with stuff flying all over the place. Ta-da! China Pig, baby. Now, we talked about China Pig at pretty fair length in previous episodes with you as my guest. So let's just talk about the record itself. Aurel with Blanche Mafelda.
Okay. That's a Romeo record. Keith Romeo played drums. And we were under Tom Monahan's order. We recorded everything before Romeo left the band. And so when that record came out, Joel Westerdale was in town drumming for us. So it was kind of a bummer. That was the thing back then. Everything just took so long, and things happened so fast. We had a whole new lineup, whole new set of songs, and then we had this 7-inch. So, but it was great. I love that record. The cover was done by John Harrison. He's a friend of ours from Virginia. Inside is the lyrics that were transcribed into Bengali by my good friend Jalal Karim Nantu. We called him the Hindu. He worked at 7-Eleven. He was a good friend of mine. We worked together at Haagen-Dazs, and he did all that for us. He came to quite a few China Pig shows. He was a cool guy.
I'm sorry. Did he work at the 7-Eleven on Mill Plain Road?
He did. His brother owns it.
Oh, no kidding. Now that 7-Eleven, if anybody ever went to Trash American style, I'm sure the 7-Eleven on Mill Plain Road was a stop at some point.
Yes.
I'm mildly bummed, to use that term again. My copy, for some reason, lacks the Bengali lyric sheet, although I do remember it. And I thought that was just one of those touches that was fantastic.
Well, it was one of those things where, I liked my lyrics as lyrics, but I was never really comfortable with them as just words that you look at without the music. And so the idea of him transcribing them, it just had a look to it that I thought matched the music really well. As far as numbers go, there's a bunch of these. Do you have one of those? You have a black one.
Yeah, I got it. Mine is classic black, but that blue one's nice.
It's actually green. It's vomit green.
Ooh, I'm gonna puke. And what are the numbers on those?
I think it was 1,500. But this record was also combined with the Creature Did 7-inch. We did like a double release, and theirs was sort of silvery blue. And so some of them went with that, and some of them went with just the China Pig records, and some with just Creature Did.
Okay, now you mentioned that one. And you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the double pack was where all the colored vinyl went. That's not the case?
No.
Okay, and how many of those double packs did you make?
Honestly, I don't remember. I didn't write anything down.
Hey, drive me bats, not thinking that 30 years later somebody would want to know the answer, Craig.
I was too busy coming up with a name for another label, man.
Yeah, right. And we will mention that by now, as you can see, this is officially M.U.D. Industries. You got the logo, you got the name. You told me the story about the logo, but I forget. So give us the background, man.
There was a typography textbook at Barnes and Noble, and one day Tom Monahan was like, "Hey, check this logo out. You should steal this." And it was like an oil company that had that logo. And originally there was some hand-drawn ones by Mindy Bells. She did a lot of flyers for us, and she did the Chop Whip Great Liquefy. She did the label for that one. I stole it.
Hey, who steals wins, right? You never got a lawsuit from some defunct oil company ever, right? I'm assuming.
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, good. Awareness is not bliss. Lack of awareness is total bliss. We love it. So that's kind of interesting that you were able to do as many as 1,500 on this one. The numbers are getting bigger.
Yeah. Well, China Pig we were doing some shows at that point. It was kind of a struggle to get those guys to go on the road as much as I wanted to. But we were playing out. We were somehow, basically because of Vanilla Trainwreck, I think we played a lot in North Carolina, and that was North Carolina was probably the state other than Connecticut that we played most. Which is odd because it's so far away, but then again, it's awesome state. So,
I love the way that worked out too. For a while there, for maybe a hot year, it seemed like there was this well-worn path between North Carolina and Connecticut. Like, Vanilla Trainwreck, Blue Green Gods. Was Babe the Blue Ox North Carolina?
No, I think they were a New York band.
Then who am I thinking of?
Geezer Lake.
Geezer Lake, Picasso Trigger. They were from North Carolina.
Yeah.
They were all coming to Danbury. And I don't think we sent as much talent to North Carolina as came up here, but there was a definite awareness.
Well, I think Monsterland played down there a bit. Yeah, and Greg Elkins was such a great guy, the main guy for Vanilla Trainwreck. I remember he got us a show, and he got China Pig a show at the local 506. And he was so pissed at the turnout that he made the guys have us open for Superchunk like 3 days later. And I was like, whoa, Greg Elkins runs this place.
Seriously, that's service above and beyond the Call of Duty right there, man.
Well, and he's looking around. He's like, there's no one here. He's like, I am really mad at this. Hold on. And he runs off in a huff and he comes back and he's like, all right, you guys got to come back in 2 days. And I was like, okay. I'll do whatever you want, man.
So did you actually do that? Did you drive back to Connecticut and then come back again 2 days later?
No, we didn't go back to Connecticut. We had some time off and we made it work. And I remember it was great. I mean, Superchunk was awesome and they were really, really popular band. Yeah, it was good.
Right on. And what town was it? Was that Chapel Hill?
Chapel Hill, yeah.
Yeah, right on. Still a good town. Still a good town to play and lovely people down there. I love that place. Have you done anything with your current installations in North Carolina?
I did a cube music show many years ago in Chapel Hill. I think I'm working on something now that hopefully will happen, in the Durham, in the three-way thing there with Durham, Chapel Hill, and I forgot what other.
Raleigh,
yes. Still working on that. But COVID kind of messes everything up.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're going to talk about the past right now instead of the present, because we've talked about both of these bands at length, but it's the next record on my pile, the Split 7-inch, the China Pig Monsterland 7-inch, which, if I recall correctly, was Monsterland's kind of like farewell to indie rock because they were about to get signed, yes?
I would say that's accurate, but I don't know that that's what they thought. Maybe I don't know.
No, I don't think I asked Greg Vegas, because I had Greg Vegas on for a couple of episodes. We talked a lot about Monsterland, but I don't know if I addressed that specific issue. I always had the impression this was like definitely their last record before they got signed, or they might have even been signed before this record came out. I just remember it being like a very clear line of demarcation between them being more of a local band and having the potential to be a national band.
Well, that was definitely true because they made a deal with their label that they would send out some of these records to promote the future Monsterland record. And so Fudd and I went down to New York to the Seed offices, and we worked on a press release. The press release had something to do with both drummers in the bands were like kind of handymen, because Romeo was working at like a plumbing supply place and Todd was doing something with carpentry. I don't remember exactly what. And so it was like this working man's drummer kind of connection.
Love it.
Kind of crazy, but yeah, the Seed guys were really great to us. They sent a bunch out all on their dime and basically promoted this record, and sort of like with an ear to like more is coming from Monsterland.
Right. Kind of like a less cynical version of creating a band, putting them on a fake indie label, and then putting them on a major label puppet indie, and then signing them to the major label exclusively. This was like
Right.
much more organic because you were a label. You were an actual label, and Monsterland was a real band. So
Yeah, and I actually don't remember the timing of it. Like, I don't know if they had to clear it with Seed before they went ahead with it. I mean, it's just one of those weird things. That's a Greg Vegas question. But as far as I can tell, everybody at Seed was very nice to us and was, they really saw it more as like an opportunity to kind of help their band, but also help us. I mean, they were very interested in helping China Pig, and they didn't sign us. They didn't even really want to, but they were very cool to us. So, there you go. That's my one awesome major label experience.
Great. You're in a very little itty bitty teensy weensy tiny minority, but I'm glad it was you, because who better,
Thank you.
And I don't think that the people can see this on my, once again, admittedly incredibly cheap camera, but this is the maroon vinyl you were talking about earlier, that mix of red and black.
Yeah. So as far as the numbers go, I think this might be 2,000. And I think there's 1,000 of the red ones, the maroon ones, and 1,000 black.
Right, because I have seen both. I do have both. And did every single one of them, again, I hope this shows up on my camera, but the China Pig side, all of the photos are actually cut out individually and glued on the sleeve. What a pain, man.
It was a lot more hours than I anticipated. But I there's something interesting about going into a store and seeing the different ones. Like, wow, that record sold. It's not the same one that I saw last month. I'm trying to think which one I have. We started out, I was going to paint a bunch of different pictures and then kind of cut them up and put them out. And then we started going through our photo albums, like our old family stuff, like Fudd's childhood Christmases in Florida, and it's weird for me to be a Connecticut guy to see some dude in short pants and no shoes or socks in front of a Christmas tree opening presents. And I was like, we got to put that on there, man. So everybody went through their old family photos and we just cut and pasted and used a lot of glue sticks.
Right on.
That's awesome. I have, my copy is a picture of Nina Kyle in front of some kind of like van with I don't know, looks like some kind of mystical painting on it. Yeah, something with wings and rocks and horses.
Nice. And another stalwart of the scene, Nina Kyle.
Yeah, we like to keep her going in the collection here.
And that's one thing that I was really struck by as I was going through all of these records. All of them name check everybody else. All the bands, all the personalities, everybody gets a shout out or a nod. It was a very mutually supportive thing that we had there.
I agree. And I think, I'm to this day, I'm still excited that Monsterland wanted to do a record with us. I mean, because they whether it was their goodbye to Little Records, they were huge. I mean, they were about to go off and change the world. And so, I was always really excited about that. And I think my claim to fame is I got to play with Monsterland once at TK's, and we played Blank, and it was really, really great. I mean, coming from China Pig, those guys played really fast.
Yeah, right.
But it was awesome. I mean, it was great to kind of like, once again, being the spectator conversation that we've been talking about, like, here's this band. I love this band. I got to put out their record. And now here I am in all the glory of TK's playing this song with these guys. It's like, it's awesome. I mean, I try and tell people about this sort of stuff that didn't live it. And I don't ever feel like I fully capture how great it was. Because it really was awesome. I mean, there was a time in my life where, like, all of my favorite bands were my friends. And I feel like, that's a great position to be in. That's a great life.
It really is, I look at it from my perspective, like you talk about TK's Punk Rock Cafe, which was every Sunday at the local sports bar. My 3-day block would be something like, work at the store all day, trash American style, go to TK's that night, wake up the next day around noon, go to Trash American Style and run the store. And the whole time it's just like this entire community. And it was selling records, which I loved doing, hanging out with musicians, which I loved doing, and seeing shows, which I loved doing. It was a real total existence. It was something. Enough nostalgia bullshit. Let's get on with the story here. Here's another one in the catalog. Dismay.
Yeah.
Oh boy, what can you tell us about this one, Craig?
Great guys. I really like their music. They were just different than I was. Ian was an enigma. He sort of always had this chaos around him, and for whatever reason, he liked me, and he sort of always listened to what I had to say, and I don't know why. I don't know that I deserved his attention, but he gave it to me. And I remember just talking to him once, and I was like, "Look, man, you guys are really great. You gotta do it. I'm sick of all the bullshit. A lot of bands were great, and I just felt like those were the kind of guys that really needed a push, and I hope that I pushed them in the right direction, because I think that record is great. And I do remember they recorded it with that guy Morgan.
Yeah.
Yes. And there was like a discrepancy. Like Ian called me in the middle of the night. He's like, all right, I'm at the studio and this guy's really pissing me off. I'm about to punch him in the face. And I'm like, I don't think you should do that. Let's just chill out. I'm sure whatever this problem is, we can solve it. And there was something to do with like the mix of the vocals, something ridiculous. But anyway, the record came out great and I thought they were really good. I'm not sure. I kind of lost touch with Ian. I know what eventually happened to him, but I don't know what happened to the band after that record. Do you?
Yeah, they actually went ahead and recorded a full length. They came out on a German label. I think it was We Bite Records.
Oh, great.
Never actually got released in the States, I don't think. And I'm sure anybody who's watching right now, who's on the internet research team, can look it up and tell us about that. But they got the full length out. I think they recorded, I don't remember if their demos came out before this record or after. But in total, they had 3 demo tapes, this 7-inch, and a full-length album. And after the full-length album, it was just kind of the usual deal. Nothing ever really progressed beyond that. I think, what was the word you just used a second ago? Chaos around those guys. There was just always this mayhem and all this drama, and it was hard to deal with. But the thing is, it goes back to what I was saying about digitizing tapes from my live collection. On more than one occasion, I've pulled out a Dismay live tape. Like, oh boy, these guys, all right. And I'll pop it in, and the music comes out, and it's like, whoa. I'm always reminded just how good they were. They really, honest to God, were good. Ian Keeler was a hell of a songwriter, and I think the record should reflect that.
Well, I think there was, and specifically him, there was a certain power to his voice and his presence, but there's also like this element of style that I thought usually doesn't go along with that power that I really liked. It wasn't just this full-on barrage. There's something very, there was a groove to it that I really liked, that I think was, missing in some other hardcore bands at the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the lyrics, I'm always struck by the lyrics, man. The lyrics are so human. There's very little of that bravado, like you stabbed me in the back and now you're going to pay. There's some of that there, but by and large, it's just like the lyrical chronicle of this guy trying to make sense out of the world that he's like found himself stuck in. It's really poignant when you get right down to it.
I think Ian thought about life a lot more than maybe he let on. I feel like I was in a great position to kind of always be around him, like in the middle of the night where it was just the two of us, and he didn't have that bravado. He never really kind of pulled that shit with me. It was just, just two guys that knew each other. And it's a shame how they're one of those guys. That's one of those bands that kind of slipped through the cracks for me. I got to do that record, and then, my life kind of went in a certain way, and their life went in a different way.
That is true, because this came out in '93, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's a date on here. It says '93, and that was, kind of a continuation of what we were saying earlier about 1991. It's like the paths diverging was becoming even more and more pronounced as time went on. So I do kind of remember '93 and your relationship with music like this as being, I was kind of surprised that you did this record, actually, because you had already started to go much further afield, but you did it. And like we were saying earlier, it's good. So it's here.
I wish I had like some master plan that I could share with you. But as Tom Monahan once put it, I'm like a guy that was just carrying a ball and running full speed. And I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I liked them. I thought they were cool. That's the criteria for signing. I thought you were cool.
Yeah. I could not argue with that. That's why I've still got boxes of unsold Far Cry records. Good record, though. Real good record. Just saying. Good record. Todd Ranzik, I know you're out there. Hi. Hello. What were the numbers on this one, sir? Do you remember?
There was, I think, maybe 1,500 of those, but there was a problem with the covers. Because the cover, had all those religious symbols on them, and somewhere along the way, the artwork got flipped around, and so everything was backwards. And I was like, "Yeah, Ian, we can't do that. That's disrespectful. So we have to figure out how to do this." So you probably have some of those covers, but I tried to pull them all back and burn them or do whatever I did with them. But yeah.
All right, I'll have to look for that one. I don't recall seeing any variants on that one. Everything seems to be the way it is, but just one more thing to look for now for the rest of my life. I can do it. I've got one record left in my pile, and that's the one that we used as our placard at the beginning, the Immortal Chop Whip Great Liquefy compilation with, I don't know if it's got everybody, it's got a lot of people on it. Monsterland, Ganufas, China Pig, Bad Dream House, Freak Baby, Transylvania Death Express, Bunny Brains, Onion, and Head. So let's talk about some of the bands on this album that we haven't already talked about, such as Bad Dream House.
Bad Dream House was one of those bands that were sort of the Bridgeport scene, and I kind of knew those ladies peripherally, and they were always really nice to me, and it was awesome to kind of do something with them. I will say, for the record, every single band on that compilation gave me what I thought was their best work. And for that, I will always be grateful. And interestingly enough, the Bad Dream House song is called something with mud. And so I always thought that was cool. Yeah.
Everything falls to mud. It's a great tune, man. Great tune. Freak Baby.
Freak Baby.
We love Freak Baby. Whether you're impressions of Freak Baby, dude, John Howard, Martha Hamilton, sometimes Todd Knapp. No, I'm wrong about that. John and Martha, yes.
And Elisa Flynn played guitar.
Right.
Actually, I think their first show, even Ernie played at Trash American Style.
That's true. I think their one and only show as a quartet was right after Ernie quit Head, and I just joined Head, and now there's this brand new group, Freak Baby, so tensions were high. But they rocked.
Yeah. No, it's good.
They Freak Baby brought I think some of the avant-garde flavor to the table, if you would, because John Howard was a big jazz guy. Elise, total self-taught guitar player, so she had no fixed style at all. She just made this stuff up as it came to her. And I'm not sure what Martha's pedigree was on the bass, but she was in this avant-garde self-created thing at the same time, and they really had a unique sound. Transylvania Death Express, not from Danbury.
No. I don't know where those guys came from, or how they sent a 7-inch to XCI, and it was great. And I remember, I think Greg Vegas gave it to me. He's like, you got to listen to this thing, man. It's awesome. And I thought it was, I agreed. I thought it was really good. And so it was just one of those things, like, you know, what we were talking about, what does a scene need? I think having a radio station like XCI where people send stuff, and having someone who's open-minded like Greg Vegas to open the package and not throw it away is awesome. Yeah, those guys were great. I every once in a while I bump into Brian Sinclair here and there.
Mm-hmm.
They're another band I wish I knew more about what they've done in the last 20 years, but
yeah,
do you
not
know?
much. I mean, they were from New Britain. I remember that. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. This is probably a matter of the public record, but the other two dudes in the band, both each had a drinking problem. And at one point, they each decided to stop and to just clean up and get sober and stay on the straight and narrow, which no doubt was, you know, good for them, what they had to do. But if I remember, it kind of took the wind out of the sails of the band, because they couldn't be all wild and crazy like that anymore. They had to, you know, they had to stay on the path of righteousness. And that was about it, really, as I remember. If I'm wrong, please people correct me, but that's how I remember it. I remember those two guys coming to shows for a while after that, and they just kind of like looked like they just didn't kind of know what to do, you know. And I can understand that, because you're changing your lifestyle completely, and all the things that used to be cool and fun and wacky and, you know, ha ha ha, are all of a sudden like the things that are going to kill you. So you've got to tread cautiously. So yeah, Transylvania Death Express. That's how I remember it going on. And then the next band that we haven't talked about yet is the Bunny Brains, and I want to talk about the Bunny Brains. So let's continue onward, shall we?
Onward and upward, brother.
I got nothing. What do you got?
Well, on the CD of Chop Whip Great Liquefy, there is a track by the Fearless Moonfuckers. And that was Joe Roberto, me, and Ryan Blessey. And, you know, this is like one of those things, like, we would just go off into the woods and just play music. And sometimes we recorded it. And this is one of those things I wish that I pursued that, because, you know, Joe is like a fountain. he's just sitting there, and awesome stuff just falls out of his mouth. And I was like, man, looking back, I wish we did more of that.
Yeah, and you should. It's worth mentioning too. I've forgotten about this too. The CD's got a lot of bonus cuts on it besides that.
Yeah, it has a couple of tracks from the 7 inches. One from Onion Head and Monsterland.
Right on, and also different cover art. You're sparking the memory now. There was a very subtle difference between the various cassette, and this is also important. You did this on full-length vinyl, cassette, and CD.
Yes, and one of the things I never liked is seeing a record and a CD and a cassette all have the same artwork, because in my mind, they're different sizes. So therefore, I think they should be different pieces of art. And so that's what I did with this. And, that's not really, that's not how they do it, but I don't care.
It was a great idea. And it was also worth mentioning that at that time, in the early 90s, it was a lot of work to do that, and probably cost a lot of extra money to do that as well.
It did, but I worked at Haagen-Dazs, so, ice cream sales were good, man. People like that stuff.
Right on. I was always was and still am impressed by the scope of that project, to do a completely local compilation on 3 different formats with 3 different covers. Booklet on the inside with all the bands and information. I will say, just from my own personal perspective, I am still thrilled to death with the insert that I put together for the Bunny Brains page. That's from a faith healing photo album that somebody traded in for a couple of bucks. And she's having a tumor removed from her ear, apparently. So, a photo, a typewriter, and Craig Colorusso is how that happened. And it's very stylish also. Maroon and gold labels, and these are all on black vinyl, yes?
Yes, sir.
And how many of each did you make?
I think there's 1,000 of those. I think there's 1,000 records. I think there's 500 CDs, and I think there's only like 300 cassettes.
Wow, interesting. And, if we're going to talk about all the variants, of course, the first pressing had the silk screen title on it, Mindy Ballas calligraphy.
Yes.
How many of those?
I don't have one of those.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man. I didn't write any of this down. We screen printed as much as we had ink. That's the reality of it.
Very practical, very pragmatic. We like that. We like that. Yeah, great album. I would probably agree with you that, like, I don't know, we could split hairs and say that maybe this is not the best ever song by such and such, but every song on here is a killer. I could put this on right now and listen to it and enjoy it very much. Really, really good stuff. And it's M.U.D. #1.
Yes, that was the beginning. I think too, for me, yeah, I guess we'll take the best song out of the equation. I think it's very representative of everybody. And what I think was really cool is when you listen to that in its entirety, you're like, wow, how are all these people friends? And I think that's the beauty of all this.
Yeah, totally. And I would stack this album up against any compilation that came out in the early 90s. And, there were tons of compilations coming out on bands like, labels like Sub Pop and AmRep and what have you. The compilation was, a very definite presence in record store bins. I'll stack this one up against any one of them, baby. Pound for pound, it's a winner.
And a side note, that arm in the cover is the arm of the famous comedian Joe DeVito.
Oh, yes. Famous comedian Joe DeVito. I think that's how he refers to himself. Yes, famous comedian.
He is a comedian and he is famous, so I think it's accurate.
He is, man. I've seen him do his shtick live. He's good, too. He's real good.
I told him, I was like, I always thought you were funny, but man, you are really good at this.
Yeah. I mean, dude's been on network TV. He's one of the Western Connecticut alum who made good, He made good. Joe, if you will deign to watch this, if you can somehow take a step down off the pedestal and squint down way low and kind of make us out and watch this. Hi, thanks for tuning in, Joe. Funny guy.
All right, I'll show you what I got next.
Yeah.
The GNU Fuzz LP.
That's a classic.
I love this record. I love these guys. This music is great. Once again, cassettes, CDs, LPs, all different designs. With this collage, I had a lot more to work with. So all of the formats are different. Yeah, man. I think GNU Fuzz should have been kings of the world as well.
Yeah, and
what can you say?
Like Monsterland, they did break out a little bit. They toured nationally. They did at least one tour with Blues Traveler. They definitely took it up a notch.
Well, funny story about that. They were doing the tour with Blues Traveler, and China Pig was on tour, and so Joe needed some CDs to sell, and so I called my dad and said, "Hey, can you meet Joe and give him some CDs that are at my place?" And he did that, and then he called me like a few days later. He's like, they're opening for Blues Traveler. I said, yeah, and he's like, how come you're not doing that? And I was like, well, Blues Traveler didn't call me, number one, for starters. But yeah, I think their success impressed my family, so that's good.
Hey, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah, I think they were a great band. I was always taken how they took all these things and put them together in such a unique way. Great music.
Definitely. And it's still with us. And didn't they at one time upload something like 400 hours of material somewhere?
They did do a bunch of stuff. It was under the Acid Folk Junk kind of title. And I don't know if it was 400 hours, but it was quite a bit of music. Those guys were very prolific. I remember going to see them practice once, and they just had these songs. They just had so many songs. I was like, I can't believe that these guys just keep writing these songs. Like, once again, why are there not like box sets of GNU Fuzz stuff out in the world, you know?
Yeah. Well, somebody get on that, will you? Gee Louise. What else you got, Craig?
Let's see, what do I got? The Wonderful Creature did record. Let's see, it's on black. I don't have the blue ones. Let's see, Geezer Lake.
There you go. More of that North Carolina stuff and silk screened cover.
Yes, I did the vinyl. They did the CDs. And I love screen printing, so that's what we did.
That's a great record too. It's got that abrasiveness that I like a lot.
Yeah, man, they were really cool. I wish I could do more stuff with them. And then the China Pig LP.
Oh, those guys again. Yeah.
The vinyl's all in German because we're like that. And the CD, this is a painting by Chris Durante, the cover. And the CD has a different version of that. We didn't do cassettes because I was running out of money. And I don't like cassettes, so it was easy to let that go.
Yeah. And the good mention of the name Chris Durante,
that was
a longtime supporter and stalwart of Danbury.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great artist, great friend. He did a lot of good stuff for everybody. And it, I like being, connected to him forever. And this is a perfect example. Later on, he did some other artwork for another band I was in called Static Press 19, which I got around here somewhere. And he and I did a show together where his artwork was up and I played music, and he did some really great things for that. I don't know where it is. It's interesting to look back now that I'm surprised it took me as long as it did to kind of combine visual art and music, because I was always inspired by paintings and sculptures. And I think for a long time, I was more inspired by like sculptures and painting than I was by music to make music. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, hanging out with Chris Durante was a great sort of step in that right direction.
Which I think directly led you to where you are now, because what you're doing is an absolute combination of both.
Yeah, definitely. Static Press 19.
All right, there you go.
Yay.
Who did the cover art on that? That's really cool.
That's another Durante.
I think you might have said that. I don't know why it went through my dome there.
This was a great, this was done on CD. We just didn't have the money to do the LPs, but that's the way it goes. What else do I have? Next in order, I moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, and I started playing with these guys, and we called ourselves Series. It's sort of like free jazz stuff. They were called Rat Fucker, and I was like, yeah, we got to change that name. So we went with Series. This was on Schrott Field Recordings, a label out of Colorado. Cool guys, friends with Monahan. I think that's the connection. Shortly after China Pig.
Sorry, I wanted to just squeeze in one shout out to Andy Crespo.
Yeah, that's right. You know Andy. Yeah, Andy played bass on that. He's awesome. Westerdale and I went off and did Diving Bell. You see that? And this paper, this was all the wash-up sheets from the printing place that we worked. And so we didn't throw anything away. We kept it all and we turned it into our record covers. And then this was after we did Machina, but I love the smell. Can you smell that? There's a lot of press wash on this.
You can almost detect it, man. It's some powerful stuff you got there.
So this was this is just me and Westerdale. We went to Deming's again. I think Mike Deming really deserves a mention here. I think for me, he really changed the way I thought about sound and recording in such a great way. We had very many conversations about the idea of recording is like a photograph, a snapshot of a moment in time. And, that really, really made a lot of sense to me. And I just loved going up there. It was just really great. And I think to take it all to the next level, where I'm at now, I feel like, as opposed to a snapshot in time with a photograph, I feel like I'm trying to make, you know, set designs for other things to happen, like a dance performance with Sunboxes and the Moon Pod. And so I think all that stems from, it's the logical evolution of our conversations that happened in Hartford with Mike Deming.
Right on. So yeah, big shout out to Mike Deming. He was also the first, except maybe for Morgan Walker down in Ridgefield or wherever he was, the first like full-on professional recording studio that a lot of us intersected with.
Well, man, when I first went to Deming's studio, I was blown away because, you know, first of all, he's like, all right, you get off the elevator and you walk a quarter mile. I was like, a quarter mile? Who is this guy? A quarter mile in your building. And lo and behold, we walked 1/4 of a mile to get there.
Yes, through the abandoned Colt weapons factory, I should mention.
Yeah, it was a beautiful space. I spent a lot of time there. Yeah, and then, you know, the studio was just top notch. You know, for me, I mean, 2-inch tape was just, can you imagine now? I mean, it's amazing. And also it was really Mike himself, because you know, for me, he took me seriously. You know, it wasn't like, you know, I've had my run-ins with the guys at East Coast Music Mall and people like that. And, you know, they always doing me a solid by telling me what time it was or whatever, you know, and I sort of feel like, you know, Mike Deming was like, you know, I don't know, you know, he knows so much about music, but he was always like, what is it that you want to do? What can I do to help you make this happen? You know, he was always on my side from the beginning. And I feel like I like that, you know, and I really think that helped me kind of go off into all different directions. I remember one time he was like, you should listen to Rothko Chapel by Morton Feldman. When I was in college, we would get really stoned and play golf and just listen to this full volume out in the sun and just bake. And I was like, okay, I don't play golf, I don't smoke weed, and I certainly do not like the sun. So none of this is appealing, but it sounds amazing. And so I bought the record, and it was beautiful music. And I actually have a cat now named Morton Feldman. So there you go.
Nice. Another shout out to Mike Deming. If you're out there, thank you for all that you've done for our scene, man. That's cool. That's cool. So what, you got anything else to tell the people? Where are we at? Is there more?
I got one more record. Strap Parts, also recorded at Deming's. It's a 10-inch. It's a composition on white vinyl. My buddy Chuck put this out in Atlanta, Mood Swing Records. This is a composition that it's two sides, and they both start very similarly, but then they end dramatically differently. It was a lot of fun to make.
Cool. Yeah, I remember playing that in the store once and getting some confused reactions from people. I liked it though. I thought it was cool. I've still got my copy somewhere, as a matter of fact.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, cool. Awesome. Great talking to you about the M.U.D. Industries, Mondo Psychotic, M13 from the beginning to the present day. Is there anything you'd like to tell the people about where to find you and what you're doing before we sign off?
You can always check out craigcolorusso.com. I'm always doing something. I'm always somewhere. And thank you, Malcolm. This has been great.
Hey, my pleasure. I really, really enjoy this. You know, it's not just a trip down memory lane. We're talking about stuff, as we alluded to earlier. It's still relevant. It's great music. It's here. It ain't going anywhere. And, you know, it needs to be heard and be taken seriously. So thank you for putting this stuff on the map and making sure that now, all these years later, we got them. We got the records, literally the records of what happened in our little part of the universe that was really good and really special and still is. And, you know, crass commercialism, hoping that people will think the same thing about the limited edition hand-lathed, only 30 made, wide awake 7-inch available from me. I'm sure that when this goes on air, I'll have a pinned comment about how to buy some. So please do that. Harry the cat, who you can't see, he's in the next room. He's a hungry little cat, man. He loves to eat food, and I am duty bound to feed that cat. So you buy this, it goes directly toward the cat food fund, and my moral obligation is satisfied. Harry is happy, and therefore the universe is a better place. So thanks again to Craig. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to Tent Talks Tunes, as I hope you are prone to do. I shall be back on Facebook, on YouTube, live and recorded sooner than you might think. So don't touch that dial. Until we meet again, this is indeed Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.